Good afternoon to everyone out there today. My name is Marcus Grimm with Benchmark Construction. I want to wish a special happy good afternoon to our East Coast attendees and a late good morning to those of you calling in to today's program from the West Coast. We want to welcome everyone to today's program, which is called Executing a Successful P3 Partnership for Higher Education. Now, I'm talking to a lot of people in higher education, but before we get started, just a couple housekeeping notes. You do have the ability throughout today's program to ask questions and answers. If you're not familiar with the little GoToMeeting portal right there on your right, you have the ability to ask some questions. And we'll be handling a lot of the Q&A at the end of the program. If it makes sense to interject Q&A in the middle of it, we'll do that as well. One of the questions that we always get on programs such as this, are the slides going to be available? You don't need to ask us that question. We assure you that everyone on the call today will have the ability to get those slides if you want them. So a few months ago, Benchmark Construction, we had the privilege of completing a multi-phase housing project for the students of Millersville University. And the reason we say the students is because while they were the ones who actually got to enjoy the fruits of the labor, the university itself was just one of our customers in this project. And in fact, like many P3 projects, there were many players serving quite different roles to make this particular endeavor a success. Now, for those of you who don't know, that's why we're here today, to learn. The three-legged stool of a P3 is often comprised of a public entity. That's represented today by Millersville University, which you'll learn a lot about. There's our private entity, which in this case is Student Services, Inc. And finally, there's a developer for this project that's represented by our good friends at Rise Real Estate, also on the call today. Underneath all of this, then, you've got the usual suspects. You've got your architectural firms, you've got your design firms, and general contractors such as ourselves, Benchmark Construction. And even though Benchmark has been around for 31 years, and even though we've done a lot of work in the higher education space, this was actually the first time we were able to participate in a P3 project. And at the end of this project, everybody looked around and said, wow, this was a really, really successful project, even though there were all these people at the table. So we realized that many of our friends in education and architecture had a lot of questions about the P3 structure, why it made sense for Millersville, and how these certain deals come to be. And we're hearing more and more about this. I've got the brand new issue here of Trusteeship Magazine, and in the November-December issue it says, changes in traditional revenue streams are causing leaders to think so intently about the difficulties in higher education that many don't seize the opportunity to think differently about how to adapt and create new business models, which is exactly what we're going to be talking about today. So, realizing we had a tailor-made case study on how to execute a successful P3, we called upon our close friend Howard Teibel to facilitate what we are sure is going to be an exciting discussion between all of the partners in this particular project. For those of you who don't know, Howard Teibel owns Teibel, Inc. It's an educational consulting firm that works with organizations to effectively align their mission and strategy and develop teams to manage change effectively, all with a focus on long-term financial health. Folks, this is going to be a great story, and there's no one better here to facilitate this conversation than our friend Howard Teibel. Howard, it's your program.
Hey, thank you very much, Marcus. This is really exciting. So let's kick this right off now that you just sort of gave a nice interview or a background on what we do. Let's dive right into the meat of it. I want to introduce the panelists who are on the program. First, we have Tom Richardson, who is the Associate Vice President and Dean of Students at Millersville. We've got Jeff Beers, who's the CEO and General Manager of SSI, or Student Services, Inc. And finally, Jeremy Doss, Vice President of Rise Real Estate. And each one of them is going to be able to give you a flavor and a lens of how this project works. And regardless of your perspective, whether you're an architect or you're working inside the institution or you're working with student services, I think this will give you a flavor of how to either introduce this into your institution or how to build off this. And we want to make sure we have as much engagement as possible. So the way we're going to do this, first of all, is I'm going to give each of them a chance to very briefly describe their particular area of expertise and what they do, and then we'll briefly tell the story of this, and then we're going to open this up to a conversation and questions. So without further ado, I'm going to turn this over to Tom Richardson. And Tom, give people a sense of Millersville University so they understand the lay of the land of that institution.
Thank you, Howard. Again, this is Tom Richardson. My name is Tom Richardson, and For those who may not be familiar with Millersville University, we're located just outside of Lancaster, Pennsylvania, within the county, Lancaster County. We're predominantly a four-year institution, although we do offer 3 doctoral programs with that. So we were, as the slide indicates, we were founded in 1855. We're a campus of about 200 acres, and we're located in the southeast corner, per se, of Pennsylvania. So we're equal 75 miles from Philly, about 75 from Baltimore. We share the 2004 enrollment because that's about the time where we really started to look at, for the sake of this project, of our housing project. So at the fall enrollment of 2014, we were just over 8,000. And as you can see, our predominant population is with our undergraduate. As I shared with you earlier, we're predominantly a four-year institution. Our average class size is right under 30 students in the class, and then also you see the student-to-faculty ratio as well. We do have an on-campus, I think this is important to understand, we do have an on-campus housing residency requirement. In essence, anyone under 60 credits needs to stay on campus. There's very few exceptions to that. And then just to give you a little bit of taste of our student body, we have a little over 130. Actually, this year it's about 150 student organizations, and it kind of gives you an indication in terms of what those are. We do have about 19 intercollegiate varsity sports, and we compete at the Division II level. So that just gives you a little bit of quick fact about Millersville University.
That's excellent. Thank you very much. And that's a perfect transition for Jeff to introduce SSI and its role in this larger project, or what you're doing at Millersville itself. So go ahead, Jeff.
Thank you, Howard. Jeff Beers here from Student Services Incorporated. Student Services was incorporated in 1956 as a Pennsylvania not-for-profit corporation, a 501c3. It's a legally separate entity from the university, and it really exists to provide services that are not necessarily available through the state system of higher education. In our history and currently, we do things like manage the student union building, the university store, textbooks. We provide technical services, bookkeeping for student organizations. We run the fitness center. So we have a long history and a large background in providing the university with these types of management services. We also have a sister corporation called Student Lodging Incorporated, which actually owns, operates, and manages approximately 1,100 off-campus beds. It's spread out through apartment buildings and 2 residence halls that are just off campus. So the idea of student housing is certainly not new to our corporations, and it was a natural fit for us to be able to help the university in providing the services for this project. In this case, Student Services Inc. was the borrower for the project for the 3 phases, and is also the owner. And we'll get in a little bit more of the role and how that works as we get a little bit further into the conference here.
Excellent. Thanks, Jeff. And the third leg of this this triangle really is the role that Rise Real Estate plays. So, Jeremy, why don't you give us an overview of who Rise is?
Sure, Howard. Thanks a lot. This is Jeremy Charles with Rise, and we've actually been in the privatization of campus facilities for just at 20 years now, which equates to about 76 projects and over $2.5 billion in development value, culminating in 46,000 student housing beds. We do have a management arm where we manage 21,000 student beds, some of those being on campus, others being off campus. In addition to the student housing, we've also done campus retail, dining halls, as well as just under 10,000 structured parking spaces through the public-private partnership arrangement. So we've been around this a while, and we're very excited to form this partnership with these team members in Millersville. Back to you, Howard.
And it looks like we may have lost our host, Howard Tybel there. We'll give Howard a moment to come back here.
I had my thing. I'm back. I'm back. I think I had my phone on mute. I'm back. I'm back. We're all good. So, and I was
You had us
speaking,
all
and I
worried,
thought it was
Howard.
everything. It's like, we're good. So, Tom, what I said was, while I was on mute, is why don't you just dive us into why did Millersville take this on?
Sure. Again, Tom Richardson from Millersville. Back in about 2011, we had at the time, we had 9 traditional residence halls, and those traditional residence halls were double-loaded corridors with common bathrooms, and 2, if not 3, of the residence halls needed drastic renovations to that. They haven't been touched in several years. We also looked at, there was our deferred maintenance for the 9 residence halls was really high, and it was a growing concern with that. And then lastly, we also did a master plan, a university master plan, which also included our residence halls as a part of that. And so, kind of based on all of that, and then also for the demand that we're seeking for our students, we're in an area where a lot of our competitive schools have started or are previously already started building new constructions that are suite style setup. So the landscape with all those things entailed really forced us to take a look at the opportunities to replace all of our traditional residence halls with suite style setup. So that kind of gives you an idea of what some of the processes, what we went through.
Yeah, in terms of the, you're welcome. So in terms of the way this project got managed and over time, Jeff, I'd love to get you to give the listeners a sense of how this was approached and the role that SSI played in that implementation.
Sure, absolutely. Tom gave an important year date there of 2011. That's really when the snowball started getting rolling for this project. The university, as Tom said, knew they had to do something about their 9 residence halls. We knew in our sister schools in the state system had already gone through, to a large degree, a lot of them, a replacement project for their student housing. So it really became about marketability too for the university. So the university approached us, knowing that the state system of higher education preferred the P3 setup to do this type of construction, and asked us, being a not-for-profit 501c3, if we would be interested in owning and taking out or being the instrument for borrowing, for the tax-exempt borrowing. And as I said before, with Student Lodging Inc.'s involvement in student housing already on campus, it was a natural fit for Student Services to step up and take on that role as the owner of this project. It didn't take long for our board to get behind the project. Everybody here on campus was very excited about the project and the prospect of revitalizing the South Quad with some new housing, and it really fell in line too with the university over the past few years making major renovations to their student union building, their dining facilities, some of their academic corridor, and their library. So it was a natural fit. Student Services was more than happy to step up and fill that role for the university.
Fantastic. And, ultimately, this is not a trivial kind of an effort, not just implementation from a cost standpoint. So, Jeremy, you guys have participated in many of these kinds of initiatives. We'll get more into that. But give us the overview of the process and the structure that got created that was really crafted and developed by RISE.
Sure. I mean, we put once this project started shaping up, and all of this that Tom and Jeff had previously discussed here was prior to RISE getting into conversation, and they soon thereafter put a request for proposal out on the street. It definitely piqued our interest. We work nationally. We at RISE, we don't go out and chase every P3 that comes out. They do come in many shapes and sizes on campus P3s, But this one really looked like an attractive project. The full school was behind it. They had their affiliated 501c3 who was behind it. They had a very tight program and had done a market study and a housing master plan and campus master plan that supported it. And so we really felt like, hey, this is a project that's of size and everyone's behind it. It's going to happen. Let's assemble a team and bring our expertise to the table. So that's when we were doing our due diligence, understanding who were the players there in the region, and we fortunately met Benchmark Construction then, and were very impressed with them, and come to find out they had a great relationship or history on Millersville's campus. We aligned here at RISE with the leadership there at Benchmark. In that, we brought an architect who we've worked with before. We've worked with several architects, but we really take a step back on each project, each potential partnership, and determine what is the best teaming arrangement for this particular deal or project. A lot of time it's workload. A lot of time it is how do we match up with the overall scope of the project. And our friends at Lord X Sargent Architecture, we had recently done a project at University of North Georgia, which was very similar. It's a multi-phase replacement housing project that was, over 1,000 beds, and Lord X Sargent was at a point where they could really give this project some focus. So we assembled a great team going in, and came up with a great proposal that was very aggressive. But I think we had the team to make it happen. As we can see here on this diagram, through this P3, we offer a turnkey contract. And in this arrangement, Student Services Incorporated, as the 501c and as the contracting entity here, held a development agreement with RISE, and underneath us were all the other project parties, including Benchmark, Lord X Sargent, all of the engineers, and all the other parties that are involved in making and bringing this project to fruition.
So from the time this got brought to you as an opportunity to from literally conception to completion, what was the time frame of something like this?
Oh, I guess it was February of the first of 2012 when we began hearing that Millersville was moving forward and had decided we're doing a market study. I believe their RFP document came out early March, and we were working on assembling our team, and we submitted our proposal 1st of May of 2012, and we're interviewing by the end of May. And I want to say mid to late June of 2012, they had awarded the project to us, and we were working on having a kickoff meeting. And that's just where the real work began. And fortunately, we came together and quickly built a lot of trust and teamwork, and rolled up our sleeves and developed our design and pricing further for each phase, and worked from there. We went through full design for the first phase, closed it in May of 13, delivered it for August of 2014. When it was on the home stretch in 2014, we closed the phase 2 financing in May of 14 and commenced construction there, which started out with abatement and demolition of existing dorms. So there was a lot of things going on.
So let me ask a question of Jeff. So as you look at this chart here, it really does put Student Services Inc. right in the center. Was it obvious from day one that this was the role that Student Services was going to play? Because you've got institutions out there listening in the call, and they might not have, for example, this kind of structure, a 501c3, playing the student services role. So talk a little bit about the relationship you had when you connected. Did RISE find you? Did you find RISE? How did that come about?
Starting back, and Jeremy kind of touched on those dates a little bit, and in 2012, in April, he was right on there with the issuance of the RFP. But just before that, we worked with a national housing consultant to develop that RFP. In the state system of higher education, we're required to. There's a list of 22 approved developers. Actually, I think at the time it was 21. So that's who that RFP would be sent out to, and that's what we did. We sent that out to those 21 development companies, and we got 8 responses. We took a look at those binders, and we narrowed those 8 responses down to 4 firms that we were going to bring on campus.
Got it.
We had a steering committee at that time of, I believe it was 5 people. It was myself, Tom Richardson, Roger Brzezinski, the Vice President of Finance Administration, Amita Barrow, at the time she was the Vice President of Student Affairs, and Bob Slavinsky, who was the Chairman of the Board of Student Services Incorporated. And so to answer your question, do we know if it was RISE the whole time? Until we got it narrowed down to 4 and saw those presentations, that allowed us to narrow it down to who our number one
So
pick was.
RFPs got initiated from you guys, and it looks, because I know we've got some architects on this webinar. The relationship between the architect is really to the developer. Did you, Jeremy, did your team seek out proposals from architects, or were the architects working directly either with Student Services or Millersville?
No, we assembled our team, behind the scenes. So it was all prior to submission of the RFP. So it was doing quick due diligence. Obviously, in this case, our particular architect, it really matched up with Lord X. Sargent and our experience. In a lot of these projects, one of the key scoring factors is, has your team worked together before? And tell us some success stories. I know it's always sensitive to mitigating risk, and when you have a team that has a proven performance and you have references that can say, hey, they worked together and they worked with me and they made it happen. So we brought that benefit, and this was our first project with Benchmark.
Howard, if I may, this is Jeff Beers again. As part of the RFP process, we did require all the firms to build that team. They were required to come. When you look at that slide that's up right now, with the exception of the trustee, Fulton Bank, and the issuer, East Hempfield Township, everybody else on that slide there, RISE, Benchmark, Lord, X. Sargent, RBC, that was all brought together as a team by each individual firm. And even further down the line, civil engineers, mechanical engineers, interior designers, all that stuff was part of the RISE team and part of each individual team that came to campus.
Got it. So Tom, how was the institution, in terms of the leadership, probably through you, how were they involved in this in a way that they were being kept abreast of what was going on? One of the big things that's so obvious if you look at this is the degree of communication that's necessary, as well as the importance of building trust, which we'll talk about. So talk a little bit about Millersville's working with the different players through Student Services.
Yeah, it's a good question. Jeff already started. I think the process was started by having the selection committee comprised of members of the university and Student Services. So to me, that speaks volumes of the understanding that it takes that it takes a team for this process to happen. Throughout the RFP process, there were also opportunities for those who might be interested in responding to the RFP to be on campus, to understand the campus, to take tours. We provided tours, and again, that was a joint process by the university and Student Services Incorporated. Interesting enough, I think we came to some pretty unanimous decisions when it comes to awarding the RFP with that. And I agree with what Jeremy was saying. That's when the work really started. So I have no idea. There were countless meetings once that started that always included the 3 areas, and that would be the RISE team, Student Services, and the university, and not just 1 or 2 members of each, but various members who needed to be at the table. For example, from the university standpoint, during construction meetings and even pre-construction meetings, we had members of our facilities team that was there and turning certain trades. We had our IT departments that were involved in construction meetings. We had our vice president and associate vice president for finance administration that were at the table. As Jeff mentioned, our VP of student affairs, myself. So as you can imagine, and then the equivalent of those positions from student services and also from RISE and also from the team, Benchmark including. And particularly early on with our civil engineer, mechanical engineer. So you can imagine the room needed to be quite large to making sure that, you know, we're being very transparent, that there's certainly trust that's being built in this, that everyone has a say in what's going on. I think the other thing that was mentioned or that can't be over emphasized is that your RFP that was sent out needs to be pretty detailed. We were pretty detailed in terms of what we were looking for from a certain point, but still giving those who responded, the developing teams that responded, a little bit of flexibility and to exercise their creativity. But I do think the RFP process is also a key component in terms of specifically what we're looking for in this project. So hopefully that gives you a little bit of understanding.
Well, that's a critical thing that I also see very often is that when when an RFP goes out and the institution or wherever the source of it, where it's coming from, if there isn't sufficient detail in terms of describing, here's the outcome. We want to make sure that each of those responding can provide their unique way of doing it, but here's what we're looking for as an end result. That's a critical component for RISE to be able to, or for you to identify the right vendor or institution to help you with this initiative. You know, I want to go back to something. Tom, you had mentioned that in a project like this, you know, there needs to be the ability to pause and, you know, for example, if the market turns, you need to be able to say, all right, let's take a pause and see where we are. And you had mentioned earlier there's a phased approach. I want to go back to that slide, and if you could briefly talk through this phased approach, because I think this is an important concept for an institution to be thinking about, and for anybody participating from the outside to know this is the kind of thing you have to be prepared for, a phased approach to this kind of complex problem. Project and have the flexibility to be prepared for this. So speak a little bit about this phased approach.
Sure. Just to explain a little bit, the top part of this slide is our traditional residence hall. So the Bard, Burroughs, Dean, Gage, Gilbert, Harvold Hall, and Linhart are our traditional halls. And so this was a plan that was put into place in terms of creating the phased plan. So the initial plan was to do 4 phases, as you can see here. And so very specific to Millersville, this also took into consideration of the location of where the new buildings were going to be constructed. So there needed to be a very orchestrated, and I'm not going to do this justice, but it really needed to be orchestrated in terms of the phasing process because of the time frame which was needed with the anticipation of the multi-phase process. So one of the things, as an example, we actually took one of our traditional residence halls offline a semester before or a semester earlier, just because that's what needed to be done in order to create the phase process with that. So I guess that speaks a little bit more to the flexibility and trust that comes into play. We also knew that, as Jeff said previously, we knew that we wanted to create a residential corridor on our south part of the campus. And if you, it's going to be a little tight in terms of that process. So the approach, or the phase approach, was critically important in terms of creating that. And then also, at the time, I was the chief housing officer when this started. The phase approach was critical in terms of the operation of our traditional residence halls, in terms of ensuring appropriate housing for our students, but also to make sure that there was ample time from an operational standpoint to create and get ready for the housing assignments to our new residence halls as well. So again, for us, I guess going back, this phase approach is going to be unique and it's going to be specific to whatever project. But for us, it was critically important for the number of hands that needed to be involved in terms of the process.
Yeah, and breaking it down this way also makes it possible to look at what you're learning along the way, right? Course adjustments. A phased approach in a project this complex allows people to introduce, here are some breakdowns that have happened, how do we learn from it? So that's a really good strategy overall, but it sounds like in this case it was even more important. So I want to open this up to questions. So as Marcus had said, if you have a question, please submit it. I know, Marcus, we do have at least, we have a couple questions. Why don't you raise the first one?
Yeah, absolutely, and this is just off the heels of Tom's statement about the land existing on campus. So this may not be a question for Tom because Millersville had the luxury of having land, but maybe for Jeremy, he could speak to other experiences. How do these deals differ if you don't have the luxury of having land?
Oh, well, yeah. I mean, each P3 that we worked on have absolutely been unique. So you really have to come into it trying to understand the hot buttons and the parameters around it as much as you can, but as well as with an open mind and really put the right team together, understand what you need to do. And in a lot of cases, we have seen universities and colleges that didn't maybe have the land, but they had a need for additional housing. So in that, a lot of times you can go out into the market and you can bring some land to the table and do a P3 that becomes, basically an extension of their housing. When you do that, and they have that demand, it does open up financing means to get that project done through tax-exempt bonds and other ways. So there's definitely options that we can utilize when we don't have a available property there on site. Although Millersville's available property was pretty limited, phase one we basically shoehorned in a 700-bed building in between two existing high-rises, and that was definitely teamwork and some confidence and trust in us being able to do it, and Benchmark pulling it off. But once we got that building on the home stretch and ready to be open for August of 2014, that then allowed us to take those high-rises offline, begin the demolition process, and to kind of begin those dominoes falling while maintaining that 3,200 bed count.
Marcus, this is Tom. I wanted to speak just real briefly about that too. This project we were able to build and then tear down in terms of that model, so that's a good thing. But the land that was where we could do the construction was actually on a parking lot, and so one of the biggest concerns that we see within this area here is parking. So while we did have land, there was also some concerns in terms of where that first phase was going to be built. And again, I think it speaks volumes to those around the table to making sure that project or that the kickoff was well done. It even, one of the partners or considerations that we haven't spoke about is making sure that your town or your borough is on board as well. And so this was one of those times with phase one with the parking that we needed to make sure that we had appropriate parking, not only for borough considerations, but also for our students as well. Great.
So I want to talk a little bit about, these kinds of projects are, when something like this is complex and it requires a strong degree of communication, in some cases territorialness, and, but it sounds from talking to the three of you, for the most part, this is going well. At the same time, there's always challenges. So, Jeremy, you've participated, as we've talked prior, in almost 55 of these kinds of projects. Could you speak to some of the challenges, if anybody is thinking about doing this or is part of something like this? what are some of the challenges or concerns people should be paying attention to? And then Tom and Jeff, I'd love to get your perspective, having just gone through this, some of the challenges that you face. So what about yourself, Jeremy? What have you seen in other places?
Like I said, I mean, it's definitely unique in every case. You know, a lot of schools are used to going through a traditional type process where they procure the funds or maybe get capital funding to do a project, and then have to go through a process to hire an architect and then bid those plans. When you break out of that mold and you start looking at going through that methodical process and compare it to hiring, you know, one firm who brings all the players to the table and having that one shot and one agreement, you can imagine that can be a bit daunting, because that's an unknown, and once you commit to it, you know, that's your horse. So, you know, a lot of times that is a concern. It's a loss of control because you don't control all the different parties that are involved. So it
really requires building
critical.
Trust among the leadership of the institution.
Well, it does. It requires building that trust before you hire, because, I mean, you're going to hire a partner, say Rise, but you're really going to get to know them well after you hire them. So what's your homework up front?
That's
and
right.
What is giving you that peace of mind to get comfortable with them, you know, before you hire them? And part of that is the team members that we put together, and the story that we tell, and the commitment that we you know, commit to in our past experiences as well.
So Tom and Jeff, what was it like for you guys having gone through this? What were some of the things that anyone listening, you know, that you will probably go through this, or anything you'd like to share with people that would be of help to know that it's normal to have these kinds of things happen, but on the other side of it, it's a powerful outcome. We're going to talk about benefits in a minute. So Tom, what about you? What did you observe, at least early on, that was of greatest challenge here?
Wow. I don't know if this is the greatest challenge, but a couple that come to mind was that we knew we were going to be under construction in an area that was occupied by students for, you know, 3 to 4 years. And so we needed to make sure that we communicated with a great deal of diligence to our student body, because quite honestly, there's going to be at least minimal quality of life issues. You know, dust factors, for example, or the noise. There might be some noise issues that are going on with that. There were times where we needed to do early morning pours, concrete pours, those types of things. And so what's the communication plan to our students to make sure that they understand of what's going on? And so how one of the things that we were able to tackle that with after a period of time when things were a little bit more secure was we were able to do tours for our students. We were able to give tours to our students to see what the progress has been, as opposed to standing back, you know, 100, 200.
And what was their reaction? Because I think this is really important. I mean, there's some incredible benefits here. What was their reaction at that point?
So, if they got to walk through, once they got, I conducted a lot of the tours. I honestly do not remember anyone who wasn't impressed with the project as it was going on. In fact, we ran out of spots for doing tours, quite honestly. So
that's great.
The other
well, that's just building that positive momentum.
I'm sorry?
I said this is really about how you build positive momentum, and it sounds like by doing that midstream, it had such a benefit. What were you going to say?
And the other thing as a challenge is that, you know, really working with our construction team. You know, for those who are aware of the culture of construction, the earlier the better. You know, I would think that if they wanted to start at 6 a.m., they would start at 6 a.m. But I was appreciative of being able to go to that big table and that big room and be able to say, hey, can we start at a later time, or can you do things that don't create a lot of noise initially? to take into consideration our student body within reason. We also knew that there was a time frame that had to be hit. So it's a lot of give and take with that.
Absolutely.
And I think that comes back to the trust and making sure that while there's going to be some impact from our students in the campus community, we also understand that there's an eye on the prize and make sure, at 3 years down the road, we're going to have this wonderful project.
Anything you want to add to that, Jeff?
Yeah, for student services, Hank, I mean, I would think one of our bigger challenges was management of the budget and working with the university in terms of management of the budget. And I think it's a unique position for a university to be in, to have 1,909 beds being built on their campus that they don't own, and they don't necessarily have oversight of the construction budget. The whole process is really driven by initially the market study. The market study goes out and determines the rents that the market will bear. The rents that are determine the revenue, which determine the pro forma, which determine how much money you have in that bucket to build these facilities. And
yes,
you go through design, and you bring in the carpenter. In our scenario, I guess I should point out that we have a management agreement back with the university to manage these facilities, both from maintenance and facilities and housekeeping and actually taking care of the student body there. So all those people that Tom brought up earlier, all those people were involved in the design process. So we had carpenters in the design process, we had electricians, and everybody has a different need or want for a facility like this. And it was difficult in managing those expectations and getting people to understand that the bucket of money is the bucket of money, and we've got to build it under these parameters.
Sure. What comes to mind for me is also you're building a big community, and in the end, people have to be looking back after the successful completion of this and saying, this makes for a stronger community. There's no question you can't be there. We're going to talk for a minute some of the things that really are the reasons to pursue this. But before then, Marcus, why don't you share, I think you got a really great question there to share with the panelists.
Yeah, we did, and this really speaks to the why. Why do we put up with why do we do this complicated structure that's on the screen here? So, and we actually had another question come in too. But let me go back to my first question here. Is the financing bond issue based on the economic strength of student services or the university? In other words, if the university does not have debt capacity, does this model still work?
Yes, the model still does work because the affiliate or the 501c is actually taking on the debt. So the rating agencies do look at the university's financial strength. They look at student services' financial strength. They look at really the performance of the project, the performer. How well is this project going to perform, and will it work? Those are the things they're looking at.
Awesome. Howard, can I jump in here? Because
yeah, please.
Go ahead. So did somebody want to jump in with something else about the bond issue? Okay. So this question, Jeremy. I think this one is Jeremy, did you have another statement about that?
Jeremy has a statement.
Yeah, just to follow up with Jeff's statement, it's exactly right. I mean, part of this financing is set up to be project financed. So the project is underwritten and designed and plugged into the pro forma to support itself. So through that market study, we showed that demand, and the bond investors that bought these tax-exempt bonds basically were buying into that, the market, the ongoing market, and obviously they underwrite the other parties involved, in Millersville being the ongoing, operating university, their strength. But truly, it's built to be a project financed model and not be subsidized by any third party means or by the university.
Marcus, did you have a second question you wanted to share with the group?
I do, and it's totally unrelated, but I think it is bouncing off of Jeff's most recent point, because I do think that this was one of the nuances of this particular project that might not necessarily always apply. So, but in this particular case at Millersville, when there's a maintenance issue for a student, toilet won't flush, light bulb burned out, are they calling Millersville or are they calling SSI? And however you all do it, is that common?
In our scenario, the student would call the university's facilities to put the work order in. I'll let Jeremy speak to if it's common across P3s, but it worked here at Millersville. Millersville already obviously had the staff already doing this in the 9 traditional halls, so it just made sense at that time to roll those folks right into the new buildings.
Yeah,
Wonderful.
And this is
Go ahead, Jeremy.
Jeremy, from a national perspective, we see universities keeping it all in house and just bringing into the fold the residence life, and they maintain the facility as well. We also have some facilities where we handle everything, including residence life, facility maintenance, asset management. But more and more, the growing trend is, in one of our latest projects, a 2,000-bed project at LSU, we just broke ground on. LSU Housing and Residence Life will be the room assignments, rent collection, and all residence life programming, while RISE is the facility manager and will maintain and asset manage the facilities for the term of the financing. So there's options there.
You know, as we move towards sort of wrapping up and focusing on benefits, I just want to say that this is the way of the future. And the way of the future is to be more creative and focusing on where the expertise lives. You know, institutions that are willing to step back and say, we want an outcome. We don't have the capacity to do certain things. Let's bring experts in who can both execute and take ownership. It's an example of something that more and more schools that even I'm seeing in our work are happening. So let's just take a couple minutes and wrap this up, because this is really the point. This is the big why. So let's talk about the first one. Tom, you wanted to speak to this access to permanent tax-exempt financing? This first, because this says so much about why this is important.
I'll take that one, Howard. This is Jeff. For Millersville University and PASSHE, I talked about PASSHE regulations and how we build these with the P3 and the 21 developers and things, but really this system works well to keep the debt off the state system of higher education's books. And it would work other places as well if you're not in this system, if you're a private school, to keep the debt off the university's books. It brings in an outside partner who still has that ability to get that tax-exempt financing, whether it be bonds or other means. And it also allows the university to procure in ways that they may not be able to do on their own. The P3 here in the state system takes the low bid out of the equation. We're able to go after and choose a developer who may not necessarily be the lowest price, but meets our needs to the best degree. I hope that answered your question, Howard.
Fantastic. Who wants to take a second set of bullets?
Howard, this is Jeremy. I can kind of build on that.
Go for it.
Yeah, just kind of working down the list here, and along just building on what Jeff was saying, through the ground lease structure, just the property that was encumbered by the housing itself goes into a ground lease that's coterminous with the length of the financing. So in this project, we have 30-year bonds, and that ground lease will expire once the rental revenue pays the bonds off, and the improvements will revert back to the ownership of Millersville University. It also gives you the ability to refinance or even purchase the improvements out of the bond financing in case there were better terms that may come up. Although we did achieve great terms for these 3 phases and these 3 bond issuances. I think we were at a blended average of about 4.5% interest rate for the project. So a lot of benefits. Others include just overall speed to market. You know, this team was hired in June of 2012. We had brand new facilities on the ground by August of 2014. And then 2015, and then 2016. By 2016, 1,900 new beds. All the old beds were demolished. Everything was buttoned up, new landscaping, and practically 100% occupied.
Yeah. So, to me, thank you for that, Jeremy. The last 3 bullets say everything, because in the end, you're creating a certain kind of momentum. And, if you look at these three, demand for on-campus housing increasing, auxiliary demand around, and now the institution's looking at dining to expand because they can see the success of this. And finally, using this as a way to build on your enrollment strategy if you are the kind of residential campus that you want to turn around or transform your housing. So without question, what this is doing is it's making it possible to do something likely in a more timely way than if you were sort of stuck internally and didn't have the capacity to execute on some of these financial concerns, or even executed on a getting the team together. So bringing some from the outside. So Marcus, let's just make sure that people listening can know how to reach out to any of the players here. So if they want to connect with the different players, how would they go about doing that?
I'll do that in just one moment, Howard. We got one more question from the field, and I love it because it's the same question that I asked Jeremy the first time that I spoke with him, and I don't think we discussed it at all. And that is, let's talk about, are there economies of scale about this? Does this work for any size project, or how do you figure out if it even makes sense for you? So we get the answer to that one from Jeremy. I'll switch slides here, and we can look at contact information.
Sure, and that is a frequent question that comes up at a lot of the higher ed conferences that we'll have an exhibit hall booth at. Growing schools, but may not, just have different levels of need. Typically, we say about 300 to 350 beds is that sweet spot where a P3 structure with tax-exempt bond financing starts to make sense. You do have a lot of fixed costs associated with the setup and the mobilization of such a financing, and really attract.
Yeah.
That's fantastic.
So, it's usually right around the 300.
So as we're all seeing here, this is how you can reach out to the different players if you want to learn more. I want to say thank you to Tom, Jeff, Jeremy, and Marcus for laying this out in such a clear way. Is there anything that any of you would like to end with to share with people thinking, listening to this and saying, all right, this is really exciting. Any final comments from the group?
This is Jeff Beers. I just want to reiterate that we had an incredible experience here. Tom talked a little bit earlier about the trust that was needed to be involved in this. Rise put together an incredible team. Some of the team members we had worked with in the past, and it just added to that trust. But it really was a way for Millersville to revitalize their student housing area, and it really kind of put the cherry on top of all the other things they've done in the last 8 to 10 years as far as reconstructing facilities here on campus.
Great. Tom or Jeff, anything you want to add?
I would say that what we shared today was kind of the Millersville project story. If there's projects moving on, certainly I think there's things that could be pulled from this project, but I would just say just make sure you do due diligence. I think having a team that certainly is competent, but also is flexible in terms of the process, because there's going to be things that will come up that you need to be flexible on with that. I think we did that, but we never sacrificed in terms of quality. So. Great.
And Jeremy, what about you? Anything you'd like to share?
Yeah, real quick. It's easy sometimes to take for granted a successful project, but it is a culmination of a lot of hard work and a lot of folks understanding how easy it is for problems to turn into bigger problems, and for a project like this that has to be delivered on time because it's going to be fully leased up. Those kids are going to show up, and they'll have to live somewhere. So, it's easy to take that for granted, but we are very thankful for this project and each of delivery that we make and the partners that make it happen, and the trust that's bestowed in allowing us to get there. So I appreciate the opportunity today.
Yeah, and the fact that the three of you are probably so tight now. You probably go out every night during the week, don't you?
It's
like
a little difficult
friends.
with Jeremy down there in Georgia, but we do the best we can.
Jeremy doesn't make his way up there regularly?
Every now and again.
Every now and then. Every now and then.
Excellent. Well, listen, great job, guys. Marcus, why don't you take us out in terms of the podcast or the
Absolutely.
webinar?
Yeah, and Howard, thank you for stepping out of your comfort zone. People don't know Howard's got a mostly weekly podcast, but we were able to get him to come onto the webinar today. So I definitely want to thank Howard, as well as Tom, Jeff, and Jeremy. And you guys were just terrific in sharing your story with us. Certainly want to thank the audience today. Very great group of questions. Plenty of contact information here. Feel free to get with any of us. And we will be sending you slides after this program. So that being said, once again, my name is Marcus Grimm, VP of Market Growth and Innovation here at Benchmark Construction. Thank you all and have a great holiday season.